Hi, my friends. Thanks for joining me today. I wanted to take a minute on here to discuss the big and bad and terrifying poison hemlock. Um, I'm just kidding. It's not big and bad and terrifying. But I have come across many news articles lately, especially here in the Southeast, that are very fear-mongering. Um, and a lot of people are sending me these articles, uh, saying, have you seen this? Do I need to be afraid of it? Watch out when you're outside. People being afraid to go out on hikes or out of their homes. And this is absolutely absurd. And so I'm here today to offer a little bit of education on poison hemlock because the best antidote to fear is education and knowledge. And so what we know, we don't have to fear. So, poison hemlock is a plant that grows in abundance here in the Southeast. I am around the Nashville area, and it is especially robust. Its population is especially robust here. But it's not like all of a sudden this summer it's that much more abundant than it was last summer or the summer before. This is a plant, and we're talking about, by the way, Conium maculatum. So it's not water hemlock. That's a completely different plant. Um, and we are talking about specifically poison hemlock. And um, it grows in areas that have been disturbed by development. So that's why we are seeing it here around Nashville. That's why you're seeing it around larger cities, areas that have really been encroaching into the wild spaces. Lots of construction, lots of disturbance, and this plant will pop up in those spaces. And so in that way, I think of it as a bit of a protector of the edges and of the boundaries. And it's just kind of standing up and saying, hey, that's enough. These are wild spaces. Let's keep them wild. So I'm kind of going to stand guard right here and make you afraid. So maybe you'll leave us alone and give the plants and the critters somewhere to be instead of putting a tall skinny on every little plot of land as they're doing in Nashville. So I have a lot of respect for this plant. I'm always happy when I see it. Um, and if you actually understand this plant and if you spend even 5 minutes getting familiar with its botanical characteristics, you're not going to confuse it for anything else. So the whole reason why this plant created a lot of fear is that there were some people at some point, this is not a very common occurrence, this happened a handful of times. People confused the root of poison hemlock for the root of wild carrot. They ate the root thinking it was a wild carrot and they died. So it's true, this plant and the right quantity is deadly. If you eat enough poison hemlock, you will die. Um, if you ingest even small quantities of poison hemlock, it can make you very sick. You will need to seek medical attention. If you inhale poison hemlock, it will also create issues that might require medical attention. And so it is definitely a plant that you should know about and respect, but it's not out to get you. It's not trying to attack you. You're not going to break out into a full body rash just by walking near it. The things that I'm reading in the newspaper articles, and it doesn't help that when you do a Google search to say, does poison hemlock cause a rash, you get these medical, quote unquote, medical sites that are claiming poison hemlock will give you a rash upon contact. And then the photo of the plant that they're calling poison hemlock is actually not poison hemlock. It's cow parsnip or it's poison parsley. It's something that does indeed have oils that give you a rash. So it's the wrong plant. It's the wrong identification. We're spreading false information over here. So I have to speak for the plants. Poison hemlock does not have a poison that is in the form of an oil. Okay. Poison ivy, poison oak, they have oils like urushiol. And that is what causes the rash upon contact because those oils are getting onto and into your skin and it's initiating that reaction. Okay. Poison hemlock doesn't have those oils at all. The hemlock poison is an alkaloid-based poison. What that means is that it needs to be in your bloodstream, or it needs to be inhaled in order to create an impact. Okay, and the rash is not the impact that the poison in poison hemlock creates. It's going to uh, dampen your nervous system, so it's going to depress breathing, it's going to lower your rate. Basically, all of your bodily reactions are going to get slowed down and eventually stopped. It can create organ failure, right? So it's a lot more serious than just a rash if you ingest or inhale hemlock. So that's why it's so important to understand what it looks like. It's very easy to not eat it if you know what it is. And when I'm talking about inhalation, I don't just mean you're breathing while you're walking by it. I mean that you are, mowing it down or ripping it up, and all of those alkaloids get released into the air, and then you're inhaling them, or you're putting this on a burn pile and then inhaling the smoke. Don't do any of that stuff, okay? We're going to talk later about what to do. But also, one I'm going to show you some of the supposed lookalikes of poison hemlock that are growing in this area, and you're going to see that it's easy to tell them apart if you just pay the very minimal amount of attention to what the leaves look like, what the stem looks like, and what the flowers look like. So, that being said, poison hemlock in most people is not going to cause any sort of contact dermatitis or topical rash. Okay. And I know that the newspapers are telling you this, and I know that there are medical websites that are telling you this. There's no citations on those websites, there's no evidence of this happening. Um, you know, all of the evidence that I hear of someone getting a rash by simply touching poison hemlock, not removing it, just touching it, is anecdotal. Okay, so I'll have like a friend of a friend, a friend will tell me that they know somebody. Or recently, the parent of one of my students said that they have a landscaper who said that, he just can walk by poison hemlock and get a rash. So I'm not saying that that's not someone's experience. I don't know these people. I don't think they're liars or anything. But I have known people to be so afraid of a plant, misidentified plant. They thought it was poison ivy. They did get contact dermatitis out of that fear reaction, right? Even though they weren't near poison ivy. This also gets mistaken for other things. Maybe it's mixed in with poison ivy. If you're a landscaper, if you're pulling this out, maybe you've also been exposed to poison ivy. I don't know. There is a chance that if you have abrasions and cuts on your skin, and then you're also ripping the hemlock out, that some of the um, constituents that are inside that plant, in the moisture in the plant, could get onto your skin and thus into your bloodstream through those abrasions or cuts. And then perhaps you could have a rash that way. Those are very rare. It's much more likely for somebody to have a nervous system reaction, a cardiac reaction, um, something of that sort. If your breath starts to get short, let's say you're like pulling out hemlock, you are breathing that in as you aerate those alkaloids, that can absolutely start depressing your central nervous system. Okay, so if you're wanting to remove hemlock, then I suggest a mask so that you're not breathing in any of those aerated alkaloids, right? I would suggest gloves in case you have abrasions on your hands so it's not getting into your bloodstream. Even if you're going to mow it down, a mask, covering your arms and legs. Or you could just leave it be, right? It's not going to hurt you. It's not going to hurt anything. As long as you're teaching your children what poison hemlock looks like and not to play with it, don't pick it for bouquets, don't eat it, don't put it in your mouth. Then you can just leave it be. It's not going to take over the world or anything. It's not going to attack you in the night while you're sleeping. It can just be there. And so definitely just using caution with ingestion and inhalation. Those are your main concerns here. Now, when we're talking about a plant this poisonous, it's always interesting that many poisonous plants are also medicinal plants. And if you look into some indigenous traditions, you'll find out the poison hemlock was used medicinally in extremely low doses, that medicinal use was guided by elders who were very, very versed in the nuances of this plant. They knew exactly how it worked, who would benefit from it, who would not, and how to create a dose that would not be lethal. And the line between a lethal dose and a medicinal dose is razor thin. So that's why you won't really find anyone using this plant medicinally today. I don't recommend it. It's very deadly if you get it a little bit wrong. But it's very interesting that this was considered a medicine and used in that way, even though it's also deadly. So, um, poison hemlock, along with the two other plants we're going to discuss today, are all in the carrot family, the Apiaceae family. That is why they can get confused, just like the cow parsnip and poison parsley are in the carrot family. So if you're new to foraging or plant identification, I always recommend that you don't eat carrot family plants that you find in the wild when you are a new forager or new at plant identification. You really need to be comfortable with your identification skills, and you really need to understand what you're looking at before you attempt that. And I suspect that maybe whoever ended up dying by eating poison hemlock thinking it was wild carrot was very new to plant identification because as you'll see, we're going to spend a few minutes looking at all these different plants. And even after a few minutes, you can really see how they're not the same thing. You can see what is different between each one. Um, and so all three that we're looking at are in the same family. All three of these plants that we're looking at are going to have 5 white petals per tiny flower. The flowers are all in an arrangement that's called a compound umbel. So if you think of an umbrella with the spokes and then turn those upside down, and then imagine there's a little tiny umbrella with its own spokes on top of each spoke of the big umbrella. And then on top of that tiny umbrella on each spoke of that is one flower. Okay, that's what a compound umbel is. That's just the arrangement that the flowers grow in, and all of these are in compound umbels. But you'll see they still look a little bit different. They also all have feathery divided leaves. Okay, so we're going to go through, we're going to look first at poison hemlock, which is Conium maculatum. When we look at poison hemlock, you'll see that it is very tall. It's the tallest of these three plants we're going to take a look at, often taller than me, and I'm 5'4". The flower clusters are dense. The leaves are dense with distinct pointed edges. The leaves are often a darker green. The stem is smooth with purple blotching. And so, out of these three, this is the only one with a smooth stem. So that's a very distinctive characteristic. In young plants, you might not see the purple blotching, but in mature plants, by the time the plants flower, you're going to see that purple coloration. We're also going to look at hedge parsley, Torillus arvensis. These are much smaller, maybe up to knee height. The flower clusters have a little more space between each cluster, and there's fewer clusters per umbel. The leaves are a lot less dense as well, and you'll see that the terminal leaflet is often longer than the others. And on this one, we have a very thin, fuzzy stem. And then our final plant to look at is that wild carrot. Now, I don't know how much everybody knows this, but Queen Anne's lace and wild carrot are the exact same plant. That's just two different common names for Daucus carota, which is the botanical name of this plant. They are knee to thigh height. You're going to see those flower clusters are more evenly spaced, and it almost just looks like a big disc of flowers. And in mature flowers, there's often a dark purple flower in the center. The Queen Anne's lace has a very hairy stem, and the leaves are very thinly lobed, almost like spindly looking because they're so thin and sparse. So we're going to take a look at what all these look like. We're looking first at poison hemlock. So you can see these thick, dense leaves and already the very distinctive, smooth purple splotchy stem. It's unmistakable when you see this plant in the wild. So, see, I'm touching it. I'm always touching it. Never had a reaction. But as you look at these flowers, see the dense flower clusters. There's your compound umbels. You can see the first set of spokes, and then the little second set of spokes at the end of each one is that five-petaled white flower. Um, and you're going to see these flower clusters all over the plant. So multiple clusters per plant, even on the very top. That's way taller than I am. And once you see this plant once, you're going to be able to recognize it from far away just because it's so dense. And those flower clusters have such a distinctive look, and because it's so tall. They're often growing in stands, so you're going to see more than one plant growing next to each other. And as you see, you're going to recognize the stem, the purple splotches, the white umbels, and these are some of the unopened flowers, what it looks like before it fully opens. And again, the dense leaves, very thick. Okay, so now we're looking at Queen Anne's lace or wild carrot. So look how much sparser these leaves are. You see the hairy stem as well. And then you see how the flowers are arranged totally differently. There's fewer flowers on the little umbel, and look how they're spaced. It's almost like this beautiful disc. In mature flowers, there might be a dark purple flower in the center of this arrangement, and then these beautiful spindly, thin, feathered leaves. Hedge parsley is the third plant. And again, we have the feathery leaves, but the terminal leaflet of those leaves is often longer. We have a hairy stem, and then we have a smaller cluster. So there's fewer little clusters and more space. And then look at this terminal leaf, this end leaflet here, which gets really, really long. So again, much less dense than the poison hemlock. Hairy stem. And here we see hedge parsley, and it's growing right beside the Queen Anne's lace. So you see they're both around the same height, and they look nothing like that poison hemlock, which is so big that I have to lift the camera over my head. So now we have the side by side of these guys. You can definitely compare and see how with hedge parsley, there's more space between the little flower clusters than there is in hemlock. And then with Queen Anne's lace, you don't really see space between them, right? They're just kind of evenly there in that disc. You can see the leaf difference. Just look how thick the poison hemlock leaves are. So I hope that being able to take a look at these plants that are so-called lookalikes is going to give you a little bit more confidence to be able to identify poison hemlock. And I hope that also setting the record straight on the nature of its poison is helpful to you in terms of not being afraid to go outside, not being afraid to walk around on your land. Just educate yourself and educate the people in your family on how to identify this, and just don't eat it, don't ingest it, don't inhale it, don't pull it up and sniff it, don't burn it and breathe the smoke, and you will be just fine. Let me know if you have questions about poison hemlock in the comments. Thanks for watching.